Hey there, welcome to the 21 Clear podcast, where we talk about anything to help you chaos-proof your family business. I'm your host, Adam Hatcher, the founder of 21 Clear, and today is part 2 of our interview with Melissa Mitchell-Blitch. Melissa wrote the book, In the Company of Family, How to Thrive When Business is Personal. In our last episode, Melissa introduced a concept called boundaries. What is this idea of boundaries? How does it relate to family businesses? This is an idea I wish had been explained to me far earlier in my family business journey, than I had it. In this episode, there was one idea in Melissa's book that I wanted to get into with her. She has several principles of boundaries in a family business, and one of them was flexibility. So we're going to explain what flexibility in a family business is, and we talked about that a bit in the last episode, so we're going to revisit it, and then we're going to do 3 things. 3 things for you to think about, whether it's advice or stories, counsel, 3 things for you to think about as it relates to flexibility in your family company. I hope you enjoy the second sit down with Melissa. Melissa, welcome back to the 21 Clear podcast. Here we go again.
Thanks, Adam. Let's go.
So we promised listeners in the last episode, we are going to talk about a topic that when I have worked with families, it doesn't take long for this one to come up. So I spent 13 years in my family company. I was the general counsel. I was the head of human resources, corporate strategy. What you hear in those roles, every one of them is responsible for rules, policies, which in the last episode, we talked about this idea of boundaries, differentiation between one thing and another, both to let good in and keep bad things out. Why do you have a vacation policy? That's a boundary. How many days do you have to be at work during the year? And what are the rules when you want to take a day off? And you talk in your book, which is In the Company of Family, about this idea of companies have rules and family companies need to understand the concept of flexibility because it's inevitable. Will you explain this idea of flexibility for the audience?
Mm-hmm. We spoke in the last episode about how boundaries are fair, firm, and friendly, and flexible, and that there's that tension. It's a both and. Sometimes they're firm, sometimes they're flexible. There are times where things happened that we didn't anticipate, couldn't have predicted. Circumstances did change. And so as clear as policies, procedures, rules, as you were just referring to, may be, sometimes something may happen. We're like, oh, that... If we apply that rule, if we follow that rule, that policy, it will create unintended negative consequences that we don't want. And so it can be wise to be able to flex at times, but to do so very thoughtfully. Because in the previous episode, we talked about a family who created an employment policy, and then a month later, broke it. We create those policies and rules because we think they're going to promote good and protect against bad. Mm-hmm. Yes, things can happen that we didn't anticipate, and so it can make sense to flex for a situation or to even change the boundary, but to do so thoughtfully and honestly, as opposed to hopefully out of fear. I shared an example of a family that was afraid of hurting a cousin's feelings. Afraid of him struggling, financially after he was laid off. So they hired him, hopefully to do so in a way that continues to promote good and protect against the bad. And that takes thought and reflection. And honesty.
Which is conversation. It's talking about, all right, so let's do, so the idea of flexibility, if you've worked with your family, you get this. There are rules. There are times you're going to bend around them. Oh, and if anyone thinks that they don't, like when you have a family meeting, do you charge PTO to the family members who work in the company when they go to one of the family meetings? That's not a company meeting. That's a family member meeting, a family owner meeting. You talk about distinct things. That's an example of flexibility. All right. So what you and I are going to do, we're going to give families Three things to think about. Three things to think about with flexibility. This might be advice. This might just be interesting thoughts. And so Melissa's going to take the first one. I'm going to take the second one, and then Melissa will close us with the third one. So these are three ideas, concepts, thoughts about when you work with your family and you have rules and you have guidance. Three things to know about flexibility. Melissa, what's your first one?
I already alluded to this, I think, without using the actual word, and that is consequences. What might unintended consequences be? And consequences, consequences can be favorable, they can be negative, they can be neutral, they can be a mix of things. But if we flex on this rule, this policy, this previous decision that we made, what might be a natural, unintended, undesired consequence, negative consequence that could come to this individual? To, me as the leader, if that's, if I'm the sole person making that, to us as a company, just to really think it through. And to think it through not only short term with this specific decision of to flex or not, but longer term, such as, like with this family that I spoke about last time, who flexed their employment policy. What message does that send about other policies? Oh, they're not going to stand firm on it. Maybe. What light and doubt may that bring to, again, that policy? Oh, well, if they're firm with, like another cousin who doesn't meet the criteria, if they say no to him or her, what's that about? It can just create lots of doubt about the integrity behind the decision. It can create doubt about other boundaries, policies, to know whether they're going to be firm or flexible. So considering the consequences that may result short-term, long-term, personal, enterprise level, how could this work for us? How could this work against us if we flex?
I think the idea of consequences matters so much because the way you work together and own the company together as family is an inter-family business, and then you have a company around it. Like if you turn around and sell your company, the company's still there. If Chick-fil-A sold, we could all still go get chicken sandwiches. It's the way the Cathys work in and own the company together that would be missing. The heart of the company is out of the center of it, and there's something new put in. And flexibility matters because there's a company around you that you're responsible to as family when you work in the company. And this idea of consequences, I imagine you think, well, not just what is the consequence to me or maybe to my sister who works with me, but what's the downstream consequence to the company? Are there any consequences that may flow out to the clients? All right, I'm going to tell you an embarrassing story because you saying consequences brought this up, and this was ignorant Adam. I'd like to say I was 28, 29 years old, but I should have known better. So, and I didn't get what you just said, the idea of consequences. The family company, my family's company, a staffing and recruiting business, has a monthly expense report process. And if you are missing a receipt, then you fill out a lost receipt report. Well, those lost receipt reports, they were supposed to be used very sparingly. People keep up with their receipts. I'm kind of fly by the seat of my pants sometimes, low detail, and I made them almost a standard operating procedure. I was the only person in the company that had a company card that I was the top. I had to be the top user of the lost receipts. And I remember the day my father called me, because you have to send your expense report to your boss, and I reported to my dad. And so I'll tell you how you can feel the ending coming, and then I'm curious, let's tease this idea of consequences out. My father calls me, he goes, "Hey, that's the 4th month in a row you've had more lost receipts than receipts. You're the only person in the company like that. Let me tell you this. The next three you turn in like that, I'm taking the amount out of your paycheck." I'm like, oh, message received.
Yeah.
There's no flexibility to go more into lost receipts. But what I didn't realize in that phone call, and I'm sure you can hear, like, think about me back then, 28, 29. If you and I had known each other, you would have said, Adam, have you thought about the consequences of this? Like, how would you have walked me through that?
Well, I just want to say that consequences are wonderful teachers.
Right.
If I do something and I get an outcome I like, I'll do it again. So Adam says, hey, lost receipt, no big deal, fill out a form, blah, blah, blah. I'll do it again. And he did it again for 4 months, and then you get a different consequence. You got a consequence you didn't want. A firm call from Dad saying, next time it's coming out of your pocket. And so it taught you or gave you an opportunity to learn to become more responsible with your receipts. If I want to be reimbursed, I have and avoid this consequence of it coming out of my pocket, I have a responsibility to keep up with those receipts. It was a wonderful teacher for you that invited you to stretch and grow so that you could avoid consequences you didn't want.
And what I didn't think of as well, because again, this at the time I didn't understand this, that I'm in a family business working inside a company. I didn't think about the downstream effect. So the finance department would see this. Well, they might wonder why they noticed. Well, why does he get to do that? Are there other rules he doesn't have to follow? I thought about, my brother and I worked together for about a decade in the family company. So what if I keep doing this and my brother finds out? But then there's some flexibility my brother wants and my dad put the hammer down on him. Well, now you're treating your sons a different way. I didn't think that when I unilaterally changed a rule, I didn't know I was doing that, but when I unilaterally took flexibility, when I unilaterally changed a rule, that there were consequences even beyond me.
Absolutely.
All right, so number one, think about consequences. That's thing number one to think about if you're working with your family company and you're wrestling with this idea of flexibility. All right, so I'll give you a second one. Find a low stakes one to work on. When you have this interfamily business, it needs its own attention. So the company has quarterly strategy meetings. It has a leadership team. They meet. It's got budget meetings. Well, your interfamily business, you run that the way you work in and own the company together, family meetings. Now, who comes to that? Is it just the family owners, family members who work in the company and the owners? Is it some other family members, advisors? Families do that different ways. But that's where you work on how do we hire family? How do we work together? How do we leave the company? How do we make ownership decisions? Do we reinvest profits, or do we do distributions? It's where you work on those issues. And in there, if you're going to make an exception in your company for family, I would go find some low stakes ones. Maybe not an expense report rebellion. I don't think anyone would have reasonably seen that one. But take a low stakes one and put it on the table and talk about it. A popular thing to do in family companies is pay dues or membership for family members. Right? So imagine that the founders of a two-generation family company want to pay for a local social club or country club for their two daughters and their son. You could just unilaterally do that, or sit down and have a family meeting to talk about it and say, the conversation may sound something like, look, when your father and I started this company, we hardly had enough money to take care of any of us. Over time, the business has been successful. It's afforded us new perks, and one of those is joining the local country club. As we look back, that gave us a place to network. That also gave us a place to host employee and client events that felt really special. We wished we'd had that when we started. We would like to give that to you all as well. And so we'll pay whatever the upfront fee is. We'll pay that for you, or the company will pay that, however you do that. And then if you work in the company, we'll cover your monthly dues as well. Like, that is, for the people who work in the company, my bet is that that's not a perk that is offered to all the employees of the company. It may not even be offered to the executives. And so part of the flexibility in that is you're flexing on behalf of the family for an overarching reason. But why I would love to see families workshop that versus send it in an email is that it gives people a chance to, that's a low stakes conversation, okay? Like, that's That's not the decision to go do a large acquisition that may strain cash flow for a couple years. Like, that's a big decision. It's a pretty low stakes decision that would let you then practice bantering the topic with each other. Someone says, "Hey, thanks, Mom and Dad," or "Tell me more about what it was like to start the company," or maybe, "I've never cared about clubs like that. Can we use that money for something else?" Wherever the conversation goes, you're practicing working in and owning the company together on a low stakes flexibility issue. So that would be my encouragement. Find a couple of these low stakes issues. When you have your family meetings, talk about them.
Yes. If we want to improve our physical health, we typically start small. You start with the light weights, you do reps, you build up. You walk before you jog, before you run. And in the invisible, relational dynamics, that is often a wise approach to take to start small and grow. And there's so much value just in sitting down and having that conversation, sharing your thinking, sharing how it's the values that it's aligned with, the purpose for this decision, and being open again to hearing those voices that say, "Wonderful, thank you, Dad," or that voice that says, "I hear your heart, your desire for it to be a benefit and a blessing for me, but I actually hate going there." Might you be open to something else? I hear the desire behind that. Might it flex in another way? What about doing this instead? So much value simply to having conversations as a family.
And the undercurrent there is, it goes a little unsaid, is if you want to, nobody just takes flexibility in a family company. You don't just take it for yourself. We talk about it. We even talked about the silly issues. And to use your point number one, the consequence of not doing that, then people don't know, either they don't know when the rule applies or not, or they just start doing what they want until someone says something. And how does that impact the business? A friend of mine worked in a family company, and their home office was located in a place that in the last couple of years went through a natural disaster. And as they were recovering from the natural disaster, they all came to work and they could not get on the internet. And so the head of IT went up on the roof to check on the Starlink satellite, and it was gone. One of the family owners who worked in the company that had no real rules about when you get to be flexible or not, well, the internet was out at their lake house. And so they took the company Starlink, drove it to their lake house, and knocked the company off of the internet. And in part, it sounds silly, and you're like, how dare someone do that? But if you don't know how you ask for flexibility and just feel that you can take it, over years, this just snowballs.
Yeah. Well, flexibility can be wise and flexibility can be destructive. That's why thinking through the consequences, short-term, long-term, and broadly are important. Flexibility overdone creates an attitude, a perception of entitlement. I'm exempt from responsibility. I can do whatever I want. I don't even think about what, the impact on others could be. That is, kind of like the end game of flexibility gone awry. Not kept in check, not being the exception, but being the rule that we flex. You will cultivate behaviors, attitude, expectation of entitlement.
What's the danger of that? Or maybe better yet, in working with families, when you have seen that, what is I can't believe you dropped the entitlement word, Melissa. Let's do it. If someone goes, entitlement, I don't know what that means. Let's take a quick, we'll come back. Melissa's third point to know about flexibility, but we're going to take a quick deviation here. Explain entitlement for someone who's curious what that means in this context.
Well, I can actually give you a twofer and answer that question, which will tie back into point 3 that I wanted to share with your listeners. I borrow from John Townsend, a working definition of entitlement. Feeling exempt from responsibility and deserving of special treatment. So feeling exempt from responsibility, doesn't matter what the consequences are, they're not going to follow me. I deserve special treatment. That describes entitlement in a nutshell. And the antidote to that is allowing consequences to fall on the responsible party. Entitlement does not happen in a vacuum. Someone cannot behave. They can want to be entitled, but if there's not someone there to reinforce that and to indulge that, they can't actually behave in a way because someone has to pick up the responsibility. And so a wonderful antidote, and going back to our previous stream of conversation, is to get really clear on responsibility. And the word, again, tells us so much. Responsibility, our ability to respond. What are my abilities to respond? I can think, I can feel, I can act, I can speak. Those are my responsibilities. I can't speak for you, Adam. I can't think for you. I can't feel for you. I can't behave for you. So I am not responsible for you. I am only responsible for me. And I'm meant to experience the consequences of my choices. Those are good sometimes. Those are bad sometimes. And since we are in a relationship and I care about you, I want to be responsive to you. If I make a decision that I know you're not going to like, I want to be responsive to you and do so in a way that's friendly, fair and friendly, that I care about the impact it's going to have on you, but I don't take personal responsibility for it. If we bring back in the example of the family who busted their own employment policy in very short order, they were taking responsibility for the cousin wanted a job, wanted income for his family. Whose responsibility is that? It's his. It's not the company's. It's not the family's. Do they love him, care about him? Yes. And what is the responsibility of the business? The business responsibility to shareholders, to stay in business and continue to produce an income. How are you going to do that if you hire every family member that wants to work there, even if the business does not have a need for them? So letting responsibility be taken by who it belongs to, and we could be responsive. They could be responsive to that cousin. They care and want to support him in other ways to connect with people, to get a job, to make ends meet in the meantime if that's a need. But they took on responsibility for him having employment and compensation that didn't belong to them. They reaped the consequences and through that potentially robbed him of, we learn and we stretch. We learn when we're uncomfortable. We learn that we can do hard things by doing hard things. And so maybe robbing him of opportunities to grow through challenge by taking that responsibility on for him.
And I think about one of the areas where people get wrestle when you work with the family, with your own family, and you wrestle with responsibility versus entitlement. One of the things I have noticed is when you don't just have a single shareholder. Maybe your CEO uncle is the only shareholder, for example. But when you have ownership and minority ownership distributed in the company, you can see it swing to both ends of the pendulum. You can see people who believe, well, because I own 2%, 5%, 15%, it's less than 50. Because I own a minority stake, I am entitled to behave as the controlling shareholder. I'm not follow the rule, whatever it may be. Like I've seen that end because there has not been a conversation. When you work in the company as a minority shareholder, what does that mean? But I've also seen it swing to the other end where people feel overly responsible, and it's understandable. Oh my goodness, I might be in a staff level position, but I'm also an owner. So I feel responsible for these 100, 200, 1,500 people, and they feel this crushing responsibility that really isn't theirs. But you feel it because there is ownership. And that to me is one of tip number 2, go find some small, flexible discussion to have. Because the discussion about, do we hire my cousin when he really needs it, or let him learn to navigate an uncertain employment environment, or am I more responsible or not because I'm an owner working in the business, and what does that mean or not mean? Go find the easy ones to talk about, because those are important, but those are the heavy ones.
Mm-hmm. And even thinking through that decision with those different hats on. All right, with my owner hat on, what's my responsibility? What's my opportunity? As a family member, what's my responsibility? Thinking through as an employee, what's my responsibility here? That's where it gets so complex in family enterprise because you got multiple hats on. Mm-hmm. Thinking through it from each of them to view it from big picture.
I remember I got a chance to talk with a founder who they had a family company that was a chain, and his 3 sons and his daughters he had given shares of the company to all of them. And what's the consequence of not talking about this? And it was just a casual conversation one day, and he just kind of looked up and he said, Adam, what frustrates me? He said, my sons, my daughter, none of them go to visit our different locations. I really wish they did. I mean, gracious, I gave them ownership in this company. Why don't they go? And as we talked, I realized he'd never told them that. And I totally understood his perspective. I gave you this, just naturally, right? You would think osmosis would tell you that I expect this of you, and rational people, if they're owners of something, will go, Anna, maybe. But it was an unspoken expectation, an unspoken responsibility. And I thought, boy, I knew how he felt. It was frustrating for him and disappointing. But then how would it have felt for them if they knew their dad was disappointed in them for something unspoken between them? And it's an example of why it's so important to sit down and talk about what are responsibilities. Do we allow consequences? And maybe let's find some low-stakes poker to work on before we have these heavy conversations.
And it's so funny. This is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but it's so funny. If that dad's saying, I don't understand why, or I don't understand why or why not. So often we use those words, I don't understand, but we don't seek understanding. I don't understand, so I judge. I don't understand, so I feel hurt or angry, as opposed to saying, I don't understand. Let me get curious. Go ask what this is about.
The other one is, well, yeah, I know that's not how most people interact, but that's just how she is. And then we don't want to wrestle with that question. Okay, that family employee's behavior is outside the norm that we've established. No one's handed them the flexibility to behave in that manner. Okay, but now what do we do?
To do family enterprise well, it takes more courage than working in a different environment. It takes more skill. It takes more self-awareness. If you work with your family, you, I believe, are in the most complex type of entity that you could work within. And it's just inherently challenging. That's why you and I love coming alongside families to help them navigate this complexity, cut through some of it, grow, learn, because there's so much at stake, and it's just inherently challenging.
Yeah. It was John Ward, one of the godfathers of family business and family company research, said, there is a reason that this is the hardest job in the world. You are trying to build a great company. Most of us are. You're trying to build a great company, whatever that means. It doesn't have to be huge, but one that is valuable and has a positive impact. And at the same time, navigate the tension of an unconditional business with conditional family and have a strong family as well, a great company and a strong family, when those two things pull against each other. And what I've loved over this time together, where we've given 3 things to think about with family company flexibility, and last time, where we unpack the idea of boundaries, what those are and how they show up, is these are the skills. Melissa, I wish I'd had this language when I started, because it helps you navigate in a way that is unique to the family company. Well, thank you. This has been fun for me. Thank you so much. And will you please tell people, it'll be in the notes again, links to your website and your book, but tell people how to find you. And then when someone calls Melissa, it sounds like what? What? Yeah.
Yes. So my website is my name without the hyphen, melissamitchellblitch.com. And if you're liking the Southern drawl, I read the audiobook to you, and it only takes 4 hours. So I want to put a plug in for that option.
I listened to it. I enjoyed it. It's perfect on back roads in the Southeast, but you can do this in Denver too. It's not geographically. That was my experience.
But every family business is different. Every situation that they're experiencing is different. And so if someone reaches out to me, it just starts with that conversation. Like you're saying, you're inviting family members to sit around the table. I invite a family member to reach out to me and just have a conversation. What's going on? What are you hoping for? And just listening for opportunity. First to understand, and then to get a feel for, do I think I can help? All right, and if I think I can help, what might be a first step be? But just a conversation.
And what that leads to, because you and I have talked ahead of this. What it leads to is helping families find issues that are impacting the dynamic of working together. I remember meeting a family once, and before we could build any governance or any structure, there were two family members who could not communicate, and they worked together. And it's so hard because the rhythm of the business forces you around each other. It's not like when you're struggling with your sister and you can just give each other space. So that's what I love about what you do, is that it uncovers why is there friction every single time we interact, and what do we do about that? All right, well, I recommend your book. I recommend the Southern Drawl audio version of it as well. And you can find Melissa's website and her book in the show notes this time. Melissa, thank you so very much for being here.
My pleasure, Adam. Thank you for the invitation.
These last couple of episodes were so fun for me because Melissa has opened up some critical conversations. And I hope in listening to this, you can differentiate what Melissa is talking about from conversations you have about family company budgets, strategy meetings, or even as owners, how you do wealth planning. It's a complementary language and it's a distinct language. And I hope that the last 2 episodes have helped you both think or be introduced to boundaries and then wrestle with some particular concepts like firm, fair, and friendly, or flexible. Every time you touch a 21 Clear podcast, our goal is to help you, or if it's the newsletter, or if it's an event we do, our goal is to help you think about your inner family business, not working in the company, not working on the company, but that unique dynamic of how you all work and own the company together. I hope this episode was helpful to you. I look forward to seeing you next time. As my grandfather would have said, thank you so very, very much for listening.